And that looks like it's live. Sweet. Well, ahoy hoy and welcome back to the lab. Today I'm just going to be doing a little bit of 3D modeling after the last stream where I was making the ring for the Tron virtual machine launch. We had somebody ask about some of the tokens and other work we've been doing, and we also kind of had that line up with an example piece that we were wanting to do, going over a little bit of hard surface modeling, kind of explaining what we did with the ring a bit. So I'm going to be taking the logo for the change token and making a very simple medallion similar to what you've seen on various sites and things. I'm going to be doing that inside of Maya. So sit back, enjoy, or throw popcorn at your screen, whatever else. Feel free. First thing I'm going to do though, let's go to a front view here. Let's set up an image plane. We know what we want to sculpt, but it's going to be a little easier to actually see it. So I'm just going to select the camera. Let's see in here. There is image plane, view. Image plane, import image. And from here, now we have our image. Let's move this back a bit. You can see here X, Y, Z. Z is straight off into the distance. So we're just going to knock this center Z backwards. So now we know that it's behind it. If we go to our other view, you can kind of see. It stays behind there. It'll always show up behind the object. That makes it a little easier. So now the next step we need to do is figure out which parts of this geometry are going to be, sunken in, so to speak. So for here, I'm going to start with the black and probably just make the black as a flat object and extrude it back, because then the rest of it can really just be a circle. So from here, let's take here, select the center, make a pipe shape, select the height. The height is completely irrelevant for what we're doing in this one, but just because, let's push it backwards. Then the thickness, and cool, now we have a poly pipe. So in here we can actually change a lot more of the things than just the interactive creation. Let's change our subdivisions to something like 60. And now you can see we're getting pretty close in there. Let's change this radius. And now we're getting pretty spot on. See if we can get this to line up a little better. That's not too bad, and that does give us quite a bit of fidelity. It will be changing this slightly. As you can see, those just don't line up exactly the same, but that shouldn't be too bad. Now that we have that, I'm just going to simplify this shape, and the first way to do that, I'm just going to delete everything that's not a forward-facing face. And there we go. Now we have a very simple ring. Now let's add this next part here. Similarly, we're going to need another one of these poly pipes. We're just going to cut a chunk out for this C. And as you can see, it isn't completely round. You can see there are some flat edges in there. That's something we're going to just have to model into the design as we're working on this. So let's go back to our polygon pipe. Set its depth. As I said, the depth doesn't really matter in this case, but we are wanting to get a pretty good idea of this. So now let's move this where it makes a bit more sense. Now let's play around with radius, which is going to be a big one. And this is where it's going to take a little bit of just eyeballing things to actually get this to line up. I like being able to like mechanically type in everything. Doesn't always work, but let's try this. Thickness is from the inside. Okay, so we need a radius to the outside. I'd say that's actually pretty close. There's going to be a bit of an odd overlap right here, but that's something that we're going to just cut out and post. Let's think about this. Thickness. I don't even know if this really makes sense to be a polypipe now that I'm looking at it. However, now that we have that, this shouldn't be too bad. So let's get a similar angle and then just cut up some. And freeze transformations, delete history, kind of just clean up the geometry before duplicating this over. And one thing, when we do that, that will reverse the normals, so I'm just going to come in here after deleting the history again. It's always good just to delete history and freeze transformations, because Maya just isn't really good at keeping track of that. That's just kind of one of the ongoing jokes with the software. Let's see. Probably actually want to give these a little bit of space so it flattens off there. Just so when it smooths for hard surface modeling, does what we expect. So let's just give that a little space and append a poly in between. I feel like that's already on there somewhere. I didn't see it. I'm using the default instead of my normal toolbar. One of those things, just trying to get into the habit when I'm trying to set up classroom machines, things like that. It's always weird when you don't have your own personal preferences. That's one of the things I will definitely recommend for like all students. Like once you're getting the hang of Maya, you really just jump in, start making your own settings, really start customizing it for, the way you tend to use it. Stick that there. This won't be quite connected yet, but it'll give us just an indication. And this will give us some reinforcement edges. We want to be able to keep that hard edge there, so we're going to want something that's going to be pulling that in both directions. That's just something for hard surface modeling to keep in mind. I am doing more modeling to smooth, but that's my preference. I do like going into ZBrush and doing a lot of my finishing work. So same thing we did before. Let's duplicate this. Let's change its scale, this time on Y. And nuke its history, all that fun stuff. And because we flipped it, make sure its normals are still facing the same direction. From here now we should be able to just merge, and if I made sure that I was, combining those the right directions and flipping things correctly, that should, fill itself out pretty easily. So we have our C. Now we need the H, and then we need to actually connect everything. I'm interested on the coins, and as I respond to random things on the coins, or on the chat stuff about coins, is I like a lot of the development stuff. So when it comes to like platforms, building stuff off of it, while I do understand what the Ripple people are doing, I don't know if it's solving the problem that I'm running into when I see technology, computers. So that's kind of where I'm at on those ones. Big fan of Tron, and I'm not going to hide that in any way, shape, or form. Been doing some work and figuring out stuff on their platform. But, yep, I do try to respond to random chat, even if it is just banter. So it's not that I'm saying your thought is wrong. Oh, also there's a Discord channel too, so you guys can't hear that on the YouTube. That's something we do want to fix soon. But in the meantime, we're still trying to get a lot of the R&D stuff up and running on different projects and things. Well, I think the next big step on that is really just, getting through time and all of that. Let me combine this. I'm going to do a different way to split this because I want to make sure I have completely smooth lines there. But this is where probably one of the few reasons why I like this tool, Cut Faces tool. You can hold shift, follow along to an axis, and it makes it really easy to get a very sharp line. Now this should be really easy, just pen to poly. So we're definitely getting close. We have a few things left to clean up. I'm actually kind of liking that sharper H. But we need to make sure that everything is lining up in one of these axes. And it totally looks like it is not at the moment. So let's take a look here. Vertices. Okay, that one's right, that one's right. That one looks like it's the odd one. Cool, so that's getting a little sharper. So now we need to look at how we would connect these two parts. And this is where it would kind of depend on what we're wanting to get out of the model. If this is a border that goes all the way around and over the top of that, even with 3D printing, as long as we're making them watertight shapes, we can just have that intersect in that geometry. For this case, I'm thinking about doing that for a little bit of ease. But then it also makes this top part a lot easier to make a model to smooth, and I'll kind of get into the reasons why up there. But one of the first things I want to show is just like what happens if we smooth this object right now. Where are the current problems? And you can see that there really aren't too many yet. Once we kind of extrude for depth, this border edge will start having issues. But aside from that, we're actually pretty solid on there. But I do want to add a few reinforcement edges. So same thing here, I'm going to add another tool, insert edge loop tool. And let's throw some little slices. So that will hold that edge a little. I kind of want one to go up through here, but I don't know how that's going to change the shape yet, so let's just take a look at this in smooth form. Looks like we might need them. Let's play around with this here. Here's one of the other joys, though, of 3D modeling is there's many different ways to get those same shapes. It's what is kind of the effective method or, ideal method for your workflow or your design flow, which for me tends to be a lot easier. So let's take a look at this, see if we avoided any pinching. Sweet. I do feel like that needs something. So similarly, let's add another edge loop and just put it right there on the bottom edge to hold that shape. Similarly, come up here to the top edge. Cool, that's looking a little sharper. So now we can just take this edge loop here, and this will actually be a pretty easy way to knock this back. Let's extrude this. I'm just going to go to the move tool version of this and give it a little bit of depth first before I do the final one where I just push it back the rest of the way. Yeah, that button again. And similarly on this very last edge, I'm just going to hit it one last time and just give it that little bit of depth. Because now we should actually get something that tries to hold a pretty sharp edge in where these major corners are, but in a lot of these sloped parts, we're still going to get, that natural curve. It's not going to break that up any. And then we can see here at the top is going to be, stretchy out a little funny. We can totally take an extra look at that if we want to sharpen that up as well. Same thing, just add an extra edge loop right there. And these reinforcement edge loops will really just help that smooth. I'll be able to fill that and triangulate that back panel at the end, but did want to take a look at that. Here, similarly, if we hit 3, we're going to see, man, the H's get all sorts of messed up. So, let's take this same thing. The trick is just adding those reinforcement edge loops. So, we can come in here, try to slice. You can see how that kind of affects it. Not quite as much as people would expect, because we're going with that current edge loop. So we're not, let me go back. I want to show the other method. So from here, the other way to do this would be same thing with the edge loop control, but do it on the outside of this. Now look at what it does to that shape. So just little tips and tricks on where to add those edge loops, but really the biggest hint I can give is just experiment, have fun with it, and start figuring out where those spots are. I know that doesn't always sound like the clearest answer, but there are a lot of different ways to use these tools, as I've said, and it's really important to kind of let artists figure out how the tools work for them. So right now we have that inner edge loop figured out, but now we have the other edge loop, similarly that outer one, like we had on the C's, that we need to enforce. And it's going to be a very similar process, basically edge there, edge there, and similarly edge there. Now, just like the C, we have to come down here to the bottom, clean up the last two sides, and we're pretty close. So, similarly to everything else, just because Maya is actually pretty bad at history, let's just delete the history, freeze transformations, make sure we have pretty clean H here. Then just take this border loop, select it, and just like before, we're just going to extrude it back. Let's make sure we have a simple extrusion first, just do a little bit there. Deeper extrusion to get some of that depth. Then we can just do that little last one to hold that shape a little more. Trying not to use my hotkeys for everything is actually really difficult, so I'll just throw that one out there. So see, the H will be inset a little bit. Yep. And that's one of the ones I was worried about. So as you can see here, it's starting to push and pull that a bit more. So we essentially have to reinforce our reinforcement edge loops. Similarly, shouldn't be too bad, but we need to have that reinforcement edge on the inside. Now we see it, it's going to hold that shape a lot better. That's one of those things. There's a lot of ways to try modeling around that. All of them are going to have at least some artifacts. Problem solved with that interruption. But now that we have these two shapes, this last one is going to be pretty simple. As I said, we're going to be just overlapping this last bit here. But similarly, reinforce this edge loop. In this case, we're not really needing to reinforce the edge loop for bends, but we need to still reinforce that edge loop to keep that sharp edge on the upper edge. We could also do this with a bevel, but I just find this a lot easier to try working with. I kind of come from that old school method of edge extrusion. I love the old Noman video where quite literally he extrudes an entire car from just what he called kind of the cookie cutter shape of it, seeing kind of the shape from a profile, selecting that, and then just extruding the entire car piece by piece. That was kind of my era of 3D modeling. And it's kind of funny too, because a lot of people ask me now about like, well, what about ZBrush? What about these things? And I totally use all of those. ZBrush is one of my favorites. Substance, but from Algorithmic is amazing. But when it comes to like hard surface modeling, there's still something that's really nice about having this, more mechanically accurate piece that then you can go in and work with. So for me, still having that is really important, especially in these days for 3D printing. That's been a huge one for me to try to keep as much of the original cleaned up models as possible. Let's take this, smooth that. As you can see, we're already getting pretty close here. Now it's just going to take some simple adjustments and getting that back plate in there. Yeah, that shouldn't be too bad. And it looks like we need one last thing. Let's give this quite a few. Oh, it stops at 50? Psh, 80 then. Haha, I'll show it who's boss. Nah, I totally understand why they have some of those defaults, because you can like middle mouse click and then drag to set your attributes in Maya, and if they don't have constraints on there, I've totally seen people crash Maya being like, hey, let's give this extra faces. Brrr. 20 million faces later, you crash the entire network. And that's always slightly an exaggeration. So let's knock that back a little bit more, and let's figure out exactly how deep we want some of these details. I just want that to have a little underhang there, and I want this one to actually be fairly close, but I do want it inset a bit compared to the other one. Let's get that grid out of the way so we can get a little better look at this. And we're starting to have a coin. One of the other things I'll do on this quickly, while I still have all of you, fix that model to smooth issue. And that is going to be a very simple, add these edge loops here and here. If you really need it to hold strength, you can try to go in through here, but that's where Maya is not very good at following edge loops where they're radial instead of perpendicular. So in this case, the easiest way to do that, let's make sure that didn't mess up the smoothing when it does that, because that's the other thing Maya can do is mess up smoothing when you switch that around. But from here, the other way we can do this, and as I said, there's millions of ways to do everything in Maya. But from here, do a quick extrusion, go from the center, and just do a full scale. It doesn't need to be much, just the tiniest amount. And now we'll also get a little bit of an overlip on that. So let's see how that looks when we smooth. So now I think we can smooth everything. I am 3 minutes over on my speed model, but I think we have the new change token. So yeah, anybody who was following along or checking out stuff, sorry for random interruptions, other things. But I'm getting some of the new streaming stuff. As you can see, I have the green screen up, need to fix lighting and a few other things. But yeah, things are still moving along, and we're open to get some more videos out soon. Right now we're kind of in a strong R&D mode as we're gearing up for coming up term, but we're going to have some more information coming out at the beginning of this month, hopefully, where we can kind of explain where the projects have been and where we're going with them. So yeah, like always, enjoy the rest of the day, have fun, and great chatting with you. Peace.